I just asked one thing, that she sent me her PowerPoint or her keynote at really late last night, and I just want to make sure she doesn't nod off. So just, if you see her nodding off, just clap. But everybody give Sonja Hernandez a warm welcome.
Thanks for that great introduction, Paul. Okay, hi, I'm Sonja Hernandez, and today I'm going to talk a little bit about branding in general, but mostly I'm going to talk about what it's like to be an in-house brand designer at Adobe, and what I've learned from my experience. So a little bit about me first. I grew up in a pretty quiet area in Washington State. My career as a designer was brand focused from the beginning. After school, I went to work for a socially conscious advertising agency and worked and helped to create and refine brands like Amnesty International, Sustainable Brands, USA Network, and Mighty Leaf Tea. And then from there, I went to another large tech company and kind of ran on that wheel for a while, but it wasn't so satisfying, and I knew that if I wanted to make an impact somewhere else, I would have to go somewhere smaller. Outside of my time outside of work, I also teach at California College of the Arts in the graphic design department, and I hold bookbinding workshops there as well. So these images are actually from a Riso printing and zine binding workshop that we held last fall. And any other free time I have, I spend a lot of time lettering, and I'm currently learning how to design typefaces. And I also hang out with this furry little weirdo. So at Adobe, since joining Adobe 6 years ago, I've worked on as a designer on the brand team in the Experience Design org. We call this XD for short. And so the Experience Design org is a centralized team at Adobe. And it's made up of super talented designers, developers, researchers, and program managers. Being a centralized org means that we drive the look and feel for all the products across the company. And so my team consists of 5 people, myself, Annie, Sean, who spoke here this morning, Sam, and Anjali. Well, many of the teams in XD are focused on a specific product, like Acrobat or Photoshop. My team is actually kind of unique because we work with every single product and service that the company makes. And so there's 2 parts of my title as an experience design brand designer. There's the brand part, which focuses on the systematic thinking behind branding, and then there's the experience design part, which focuses on how the user experiences and interacts with what we make. So a quick exercise before I go any further. So do you guys all have those pieces of paper and pens that are on your chairs? Okay, so first I want you to draw the Photoshop logo as you remember it in that top left-hand box. And then I want you to draw the Acrobat logo as well as you can remember it, and the Capture CC logo. And then in that spot underneath those, I want you to write the first words that come to mind when you think about Photoshop or Acrobat and Capture CC. Okay, everyone got this? Good? Okay, so I'm gonna return back to the normal programming for a second. So the most straightforward description of my role at Adobe is that we make all the app icons and product logos for all the products. And we do this along with the specific versions that show up on your desktop or mobile screens. We also make all the file type icons, any kind of installer packaging, disk, folder, all of those extra little icons that float around in your OS. We work on the desktop splash screens and also the mobile launch screens, which are a little bit cleaner and simplified because of the short launch experience. We create any kind of supporting screens, such as welcome or the about, any kind of installer graphics, and any of those first touch points that a user might have. So promotional graphics in the app stores or any other kind of imagery, along with icons that are seen on adobe.com or other marketing material. And so these things are our basic set of deliverables for any product. And the amount can range depending on how small or large that product is. For some mobile products, we might produce somewhere around 100 of these various assets for delivery. For something more involved, like Illustrator here, we produce somewhere between 200 to 300 assets each release. So that becomes a lot to create and manage. So looking at branding, the practice of branding goes back thousands of years when cattle farmers would use shared fields to their cattle to roam on, so that they knew which cattle were there at the end of the day. This served to, so that they knew which cattle were there at the end of the day to help identify their own. This also helped to identify when cattle were stolen, or when they were selling them later, it created a visual association for the quality of product. So fast forward, a few thousand years, and we have branding today, and there's all these different components to it. There's the marketing messaging, there's social teams, there's the identity, outreach, all this stuff. In fact, here at South by Southwest alone this year, there's around 23 talks on branding alone. That's a lot to say about brands. And so with so many components to branding, I'm going to narrow my focus to two sides and how I look at it. So first, we have the consumer side. And this is what a consumer thinks a brand is. Usually they first think of the logo and the name. And their first layer of their idea of a brand is related to their personal associations and are usually pretty specific to whatever product or service it is. So for example, I like to draw. Adobe makes digital drawing tools. The first interaction becomes pretty one-to-one. Their opinions that get formed are based on their firsthand experiences with the products. So I use Photoshop to format my images for a website. I got some recognition for my work. I feel good with that. That equals a positive personal brand association. This is a pretty simplified view of it, but it becomes really one-to-one. But these opinions and these brand associations, they start to get a little muddy when other layers get involved, particularly any kind of external forces like your family, friends, or peers. And whether we realize it or not, these opinions influence what we think of these brands or what we think of these products, even if we don't agree with them 100%. So the next layer of our brand associations come from media. And by media, I don't mean marketing. I mean things we read in the news, things we see on social media. These influences kind of form a stickier, more complex part of our association with them. And this is usually because it's not the product that we identify with that's being talked about. It's usually the company itself. And a lot of times it's a moral thing or it's a bigger social issue that's at hand that we then have to line up with how we feel and see if it aligns with our own. So the last layer of influence is marketing. And this comes from the company itself usually. And this is a bit of a trickier one because we're so used to being bombarded with marketing messages all day long. We tend to turn blinders onto it, and we don't really let it absorb into us. And this is just my personal point of view, but I don't think this has the same kind of influence as those other layers, those inner layers. And so usually we'll see it, we kind of categorize it in our brains and kind of file it away. If it's offensive to us, it can have a negative impact to our association, but usually we just don't even think about it anymore. And so I think of this layer not so much as like a full layer, but more like seeds kind of floating around in the wind. Every now and then one of them sticks, but it takes a lot of them and it's not as common. So this is the consumer side of branding. The other side is how we as designers approach branding. And this experience is usually wrapped up in some kind of client relationship where there might be a little bit of a tug of rope back and forth with before it's fully realized. And so we as designers want the process and the final outcome to be neat and tidy. We want to meet with the client, get the brief, go back to our studio concept, put everything together, pick out typefaces, look at photography styles, all of that kind of stuff. And then we'll do research. We'll try to understand what's appropriate. Are the sharp corners too sharp? Is the sans serif too sans? This is all the stuff we start to look at. In an ideal world, everything will come together, your strategy will match, and it will all be king, or it'll all flow. But when the final sign-off happens and you execute and hand off the guidelines, and then everything is set. And we all know from this point on, it's perfect, right? That's generally how branding goes. Because you've created the complete visual representation of your client's brand. But what a brand actually is, though, is that interaction of the product with the human experience. It's that overlap, it's that area in between where things come together. That's the part that actually makes a brand. Originally, the logo was just a meaningless symbol, but that overlap, where there's the experience with the brand or with your logo, that is what creates the brand in the consumer's mind. And over time, consistent experiences with that overlap are what create equity and meaning and builds the brand. When you created the logo in your studio, it didn't actually have to stand up to all of those associations that people carry with them. And that's a good thing, because your job as a designer isn't to put all of those, or foresee all those meanings and put all of them into that visual representation. That becomes impossible. Your job as a designer is to make sure that that logo communicates, whether it's on a 200-foot building, on a sign on a 200 feet tall building, or whether it's like 20 pixels on a screen. Okay, so let's return to your sheets, the icons you guys drew. So let's see, how close did you guys get? How many people got the Photoshop logo right? Raise your hand. Yeah? Okay, how many people remembered the border? Yeah, pretty good. How many people got the trefoil right? Yeah, it's kind of hard to draw. Anyone get Capture CC? No? Okay, you should check out this app, it's really cool. So what about words that you guys wrote underneath? What did you write down for Photoshop? Did you write images, photos? You can shout them out. What? Periodic table? Editing? Illustration? Cool. How about for Acrobat? PDF? Sharing? Documents, anyone? Or business? Updates, yeah. Yeah, and that's the other thing I was going to ask. Did anyone write down anything negative? Like crashes, or, or takes too long, or, these things. These words that you wrote down, those are your brand associations that you carry with you based on your experience with our products. That's that overlap that I'm talking about. Your ability to remember the logo is partly based on my team's work, creating memorable visuals, and then also based on your own investment into the brand. The more invested you are, the more likely you are to probably remember that logo. So a brand can't exist without people consuming it. And this is really scary to a lot of companies because it means that they can't control the brand just by one visual solve. In fact, they have to focus on that complete experience to reach all the layers that a consumer might have. So building brands at Adobe has some parallels to that process I just walked through, but instead of having just one client, our clients are hundreds and we all work at the same company. Adobe is kind of unique, I think, as far as some of the larger companies that are out there, because we have only one team that makes all the product marks. And my team is solely responsible for creating these, and we have a clear shared vision about approaching new logos, and we work really tightly with the brand strategy team who's responsible for the product naming and positioning. There's a process for the product itself, and then there's a process for designing the product logos. So first, I want to walk you through the cycle of a product at Adobe, as seen through the branding lens. If you're on a product team or you're in a team that's a little bit more removed, you probably will have a completely different experience of when this stuff happens. So first, at the very beginning, we just have the product seed. It's the very initial part of a concept, and usually it's an idea that someone wants to test and see how to create and test and see how it works. This is just the product team, maybe even smaller, maybe it's just a couple people at this point trying it out. And an idea can stay in this phase for years. Some never leave this phase. But when they do, they'll go to the beta phase, which is next. And usually when a product is ready to be shared externally, when we want to get your feedback on it, we'll release it on labs or through another outlet. My team creates a beta-style icons so that people know that it comes from Adobe, and it looks like Adobe. So for this, we use the 2 letters, a grid-style paper, and kind of a sketchy look. We want to communicate that it's from Adobe, but it's also a work in process and definitely not finished yet. The next stage is the preview release stage, and not all products go through this part. Some zoom right past this. At this point, we'll get the product team almost final logos, and they'll be positioned correctly. They're starting to get positioned correctly, and they're starting to build a user base, trying to get people excited about what it is, so that when they move into the next stage, the full release, they have some following already. So this stage, we hand off final assets. They'll get the logo will look fully like an Adobe product. There'll be position, there'll be marketing material around it. And most people assume that this is kind of it. This is the end of the product life cycle. But it's not true. The product still undergoes quite a bit of change, even ones that have been around for 20 years. So the first direction that a product can take post-release is that it will kind of live on as is. Sometimes there's a mobile product that's related that will be developed, or some other kinds of services. And we'll continue to supply anything that's needed. The other direction that can happen post-release is a rebranding of the product. So I want to use Adobe Ideas as an example. How many of you guys remember Adobe Ideas? Did any of you guys use it? Yeah? Okay, so this product came out in 2010, along with right about the same time as the first iPad. Oh, yes. Oh, sorry, I forgot about that part. So if you guys have your pieces of paper, if you want to pass them out to the end of the aisle, we're going to have someone pick them up. Oh, I'm sorry, first, write your name and email address down if you would like to be entered in to win a subscription to the Creative Cloud. And we'll give that away at the end. We'll do a random drawing. Sorry. So this, the Ideas came out in 2010, along with around the same time as the iPad. This was one of Adobe's first mobile drawing apps, and it was pretty successful, and it had an active following from the very beginning. At that time, we only had a few products out. So fast forward a couple years, and phones and tablets are becoming more powerful and popular, and Adobe's invested a lot more into creating mobile products. The first time we rebranded Ideas was for the initial launch of the Creative Cloud in late 2011. Although the interface for Ideas didn't change much during that launch, it was now going to be presented with a family of 8 other apps. And because it wasn't the only drawing app inside this family, it had to be a little bit more distinctive. And so we decided to go with the light bulb metaphor to play off the name Ideas, so that it was a little bit different than the other drawing apps. And then fast forward again another couple years to 2014, and by this time we've learned a lot about what's working in the Creative Cloud, and we've learned a lot more about what's working on the mobile platform. And of that family of 8, that initial family, there's only a couple apps still around. And so the old branding and the old UI was starting to feel dated, and it was time for a full redesign, a full refresh. And because of this, we renamed it Illustrator Draw. The logo needed to communicate that it was a vector drawing tool. And so we wanted to be really implicit with that in our logo style. And this is where the branding still exists. There'll probably be some small tweaks here and there, but I think will stay around for a while. And this is just an example of what can happen, how many rebrands that can happen in the span of 6 years. So the last direction a product can take is that it'll be end of life. And this isn't a happy place for a product, but my team isn't involved in this decision at all. And there's a lot of different reasons for this, like maybe technology just gets better, or maybe the capabilities get rolled into a different product. And a lot of good marks go this way. So Adobe has roughly over 100 products that are all living somewhere in that previous life cycle. And new ones come and go all the time. And so because change is evident, a really big part of my job is to understand different ways to create visual metaphors for things that are contemporary and relevant to the user for each time around. So my team can get involved at any of those stages. If it's already determined that a logo will be a 2-letter mnemonic, then concepting the icon is pretty straightforward. If the product gets a figurative icon, however, the process can be a little bit more complicated. The first step is always concepting iteration. Even with all the tablets and drawing, I always still start with a pencil and paper and try to create somewhat well-rendered versions of what I'm thinking. And even though I've been designing and drawing on the computer for over 20 years, I still really enjoy using my hands, and I find that I can think differently with a pencil than I can with my mouse and Illustrator. And I've also found that having some kind of physical recording of my thinking has become really important to me as I work on screens. Things that I've made over the many years on screens now don't live anywhere else except maybe on a shared folder somewhere on a couple computers. But in the future, those folders probably won't be around anymore. So it's become kind of important for me to have some kind of physical record. After that, after those pencil sketches, we go into Illustrator and then style in Photoshop, Fireworks, or Project Comet. We'll find that our team finds that our product icons are always stronger when we work collaboratively, so we'll share design files and give a lot of good feedback to each other. I have a really iterative process when it comes to designing, and my Illustrator files will often fill the whole artboard allocated space. This one is for the document cloud. I find it easier to look at options A, B, C next to each other versus picking A, B, going with one, and just keep going. Because I find that I go back to those earlier versions, and then I might spin off in a new direction. And even though this looks a little mechanical, it actually provides me with a much more fluid style of designing. We take our design inspiration from greats like Paul Rand and Mark Fox. Our logos need to live as standalone icons in one color and flat one color icons, and also be styled in full color. And so it's really important that the logo not depend on color solely to communicate. And so we value the process and exploration in designing a great mark. We want our marks to be visually distinctive in the app stores and on your computer and mobile devices. We don't want them to look like Apple or Google. We want them to look like Adobe. And that's really important to us. So our icons are flat, modern, and classic, and they range between abstract and descriptive. We often take cues from the product name to figure out where on that abstract to descriptive line the logo should be. So for something like Fill and Sign here, the name is pretty straightforward, so it wouldn't make sense to give it an abstract icon. It also, the naming plus the logo also helps users in the app stores figure out what it does really quickly. Whereas something like the Marketing Cloud's Experience Manager product, the name Experience Manager is already kind of general and abstract. There's no distinct visual that comes to mind when you say Experience Manager. And so that means that we have a little bit more room to create an abstract mark. And then that way the user can fill whatever meaning they want into that icon. The other big difference is that who the users are for Experience Manager. No one is searching in the App Store for Experience Manager. They work with customer service reps to obtain this product, And so the use case is very different. So if we go back into the past, how many of you guys remember the first version of Creative Suite you started with? Yeah? Do you remember the things you made with it? And like how full or limited it was? So up until 2011, the Creative Suite's products were released every 18 months and distributed on discs and packaging. This model meant that the product team had to work, every product team worked towards the same date to release all their updates at once. If there was something wrong in the product or a tool didn't really work right, we had to wait another 2 years until the next update. And new products were added over time and some went away, but this business model worked the same pretty much from version to version. And because of this business model, the branding for each suite needed to indicate something new and that there are big changes each round. And we did this through changing the product marks and colors and shapes and altering splash screens. And this also, the styles of the icons then influenced the look of the splash screens, which then influenced the box packaging to create the whole system. So this 18th-month release cycle for Creative Cloud, or for Creative Suite, dictated our process for exploration and implementation of what the splash screens would look like. Once a product had closed its UI freeze and burned that image on disk, it was done. And because of this type of release cycle, users would often have multiple versions on their computers. If the drawing in CS3 or in CS5 didn't work that great, you could go back to CS3 and use that version instead. And that was really common. And so because of this, part of the requirements for my role, or for my team's role, was to create visually distinctive icons from version to version so that you could see easily which one that you were using or going for. So remember earlier when I spoke about how the logo is the most important thing and the logo shouldn't be trifled with. Ideally, this should apply to everyone, even the designers creating the logos. And so when you change products or when you change logos every 18 months, you start to get a lot of problems. It starts to become a little confusing. And because business units often have different needs when it comes to communicating what their products are about, the approach to logos are generally treated differently too. When you look at visual characteristics of different companies' brand systems, and this is something I love to do, if you go onto a company's site and you can start to break down how their business units work based on common visual aspects between all their logos. And Adobe was no different. And then the cloud happened. And when Adobe launched Creative Cloud, not everything happened at once. In fact, it was a pretty slow transition, including one last version of Box CS6 software. And so shifting the business model from 18-month release to ongoing updates meant that product teams could now be freed from having to be able to fix features sooner, to fix bugs, potentially release more tools and new workflows. And from a branding perspective, this meant that we could be released from any kind of big shifts in the visual system from now on. We didn't have to change the product logo every 18 months. And so with this need for constant change, no longer a concern, at the end of 2014, when Document Cloud was announced, my team took this opportunity to launch what we called Project Kitten Pony. Project Kitten Pony was our effort to create one unified brand language for all the products, no matter what business unit they were in. And so this flattened out our brand architecture and created a more rigid set of rules for the marks. We knew that the style would need to stay around for each other or for a while, and so we really needed to dial in all the details to this. Our solution needed to be beautiful, it had to be ownable, it needed to look like Adobe, it needed to be consistent across all 100 products, and it had to scale across all of those. So we looked at a lot of different things. And we tried to look at what kind of brand equity we already had that we could leverage. So one of the most recognizable pieces of the branding system is that two-letter mnemonic. And so we looked at applying this to everything. And while it might work for somewhere between 8 to 20 products, it definitely doesn't work when you try to scale it to 100, especially for those that aren't familiar with the Latin alphabet. It becomes really confusing. We also looked at flattening everything out within each cloud or business unit and tried to keep them separate. But this also, we found, created more visual noise when things are paired together in app stores, and it defeated what we were actually trying to do. We knew that we really liked the tile approach to the mark, and so we thought a great way to create consistency is let's put them all on the same color tile. But this actually defeats part of the usability part of what we need to create, because when they're reduced down to small sizes, it becomes harder to identify which product is which, because there's not enough differentiation. And we also liked the border treatment, as it works double duty for a visual element and as a metaphor for framing your ideas. So we created some simple guidelines for ourselves. Every product mark starts on a flat square tile. Everything but cloud level products and utilities gets a border of some kind. So there's two types of logo styles that we use. There's the two-letter mnemonic, and then there's the figurative mark. The figurative marks are all made up of flat, solid shapes and have a thin line to accent. And on non-cloud or utility icons, this thin line utilizes a lighter color. So for a little bit more contrast. Another key element that we wanted to keep focusing on and that ties our products together is color. And we utilize the full color spectrum with a consistent saturation level. We try to distribute products evenly so that there isn't a cluster in a particular area. We try to. Everyone loves a blue icon. And so we can't have all our icons be blue, because as I said earlier, that wouldn't be enough differentiation and therefore not usable. And so we try to distribute them evenly, but often people carry their own kind of associations with pink or green or yellow, so it's hard to get that completely even. And in the past, we would kind of place things along the color spectrum by hand and try to create more of an even flow with all the products. But this actually didn't work out that well, because as we would add new products to it, it would break down. So being the very systematic thinker that I am, I mapped out every hue, 5 stops along the hue range in the color spectrum, and then adjusted the saturation levels and brightness levels to try to get them to be as consistent as possible, hopefully giving us enough room for every product that we might have so that we never run out of colors. The last part of Kit and Pony was that we needed to unify the 3 clouds. With the creation of Document Cloud, the logo styles were all pretty different. So the Acrobat Trefoil is probably one of the most recognized product logos at Adobe. And before we redrew it, it hadn't been touched in years. In fact, because of the strict legal guidelines around it, my team wasn't even allowed to adjust it a little bit. And the vector line work on it was not necessarily ideal. So our solve ended up being something very simple. We matched the maximum width and the thin strokes between them, and brought the trefoil into that same language. We looked at other versions for the trefoil that were a little bit more abstract or quite a bit different, but we were told that if we changed it too much, users wouldn't know or wouldn't recognize it anymore. So this effort took our brand system that was looking somewhat like this to something like this. And with all these pieces coming together, it's really great because no matter how they're framed in the App Store or in whatever context, they all look like they came from Adobe. And it's really nice because as things change and new products are added, they can slide really easily in and feel different than the others, but also like they came from the same place. Having this unified system lets the user know that this is an Adobe product. I can trust this product because I recognize it. Or if there's a new one, I can trust that one too because it feels like the other products that I'm used to. It creates brand consistency. Before, when the release cycles were directly tied to branding, or when the release cycles directly tied the marketing to the branding, whereas with Creative Cloud and the Kitten Pony, the product doesn't necessarily need to be as direct to whatever the campaign marketing imagery is. And my team can be a little bit more concerned with whether the branding is best serving the customer. And so remember those layers of brand influence I pointed out earlier. So that layer 2, the peers, that has a lot more potential to exciting the user than any kind of marketing imagery would. And so with with Creative Cloud, we've been bringing users' imagery from Behance into the splash screens and letting users have more of a direct conversation with each other about their own creativity. So brand equity is all about creating consistent experiences. And the more variables that change, customers start to lose faith in what they can trust. But in order to keep in order for this branding to keep its equity, we have to stay true to the course. The kitten pony style must be king. And so the funny thing about consistency, though, is that once you have it, it seems like everything and everyone is trying to break it. People are coming out for it. And now that we created this unified system, we found ourselves needing to protect it as much as possible. So we heard a lot that the icon is too much of this or not enough of that. Is it too Adobe, we started to hear now? Is it not material enough? It's not friendly enough? It looks too professional? So these are all conversations that we've had since launching Kitten Pony. But you have to keep firm to your principles. And honestly, we are not having critique or criticism on our work is not anything new. When you create things that are so highly viewable and designers and your peers all around the world see them, you have to expect that people are going to be somewhat vocal about what they see. Our users are also extremely passionate about our products, and they have really strong opinions. And these reactions are resulting because something that they were familiar with changed. And people don't really like change. Sometimes it comes from within the company too, though. But part of that thing, if you trust your process and you believe that your process was good, then you have to hold on to what you created, and you have to fight for it. It's really important. If you're going to Kitten Pony, you have to stay true to your Kitten Pony. And not everything we hear is negative too. We get a lot of positive feedback on our work, and it's always great to see these things. And more importantly, it's important to remember that you just have to trust that process and the design in the end. Because if you listen to complaints and then you change, you've kind of failed the system that you've set up. So now for some other fun stuff. Now with that groundwork that we established for creating the brand a little bit more solidified, my team has kind of expanded our reach into other areas. Inspired by the strong visual language that we created for all those product logos, other groups in the company started reaching out to us. So the first project that we worked on was the ink and slide packaging. And we utilized some of those, the clean, modern aspects that we have in the rest of our branding system. And we also wanted to bring in that full color spectrum. And then another fun project that we worked on was creating environmental graphics for our offices. When we approached these, Our goals were to make the space livelier, inspire employees, complement the existing architecture, and be true to our brand without directly relating back to any kind of product or service. And so we concept and pitched a ton of ideas, and some of them made it in, and some of them didn't. As part of one of the key tenets of Adobe's brand that we wanted to bring through is color. And so the first piece to go up was a central stairwell of color that we covered in a gradient, a vinyl gradient. And this used the same color spectrum that was shown earlier on those kitten pony slides. And this was one of the ones I was super excited about from the beginning, because what could be cooler than moving through a giant color light tube as you walk down the stairs? And it's one of those things that it's related to our brand, and you experience it physically, but it's not hitting you over the head. We also covered walls with color drips and covered walls with geometric color patterns. Typography is also at the heart of Adobe. And so for one of our first type pieces that went up was this exquisite corpse piece, where designers from all around the office each got one of those pieces and were told to make something with it. They didn't know what would be on either side of them or what the message would say. One of the really great things about this is that we can have new designers come in and remake pieces, and it can always stay fresh. We also played with type through creating different versions of letter forms that border on pattern when large on walls. I call this one a linear geometric sans. Adobe also has some amazing type designers, and I wanted to pay tribute to their work through using the Adobe Originals typefaces. And my intention with this is to give kind of some volume and life to the piece. And then we were able to extend this a little bit further, and with a 200-foot wall done in San Jose. And this spans through this whole hallway and also utilizes those same spectrum colors as you move through it. This thing is huge. And lastly, we wanted to look at the tools themselves. So the San Francisco office is a historic building and was originally used to manufacture steel tools. And we love the fact that, you know, back in 100 years ago, physical tools were made, and now digital tools are made there. And so we wanted to play off this. And my coworker Sam did that with his Dream It, Build It piece. And he took our workflow icons and made them three-dimensional. And then, as someone who opens up these programs every day, I also knew that I wanted to showcase another part of them in the graphics. So I looked at the workflow icons for inspiration. So as a proof of concept, I originally started this piece as a portrait of Adobe's founder, John Warnack, and placed each icon by hand to kind of create that bitmap effect, or bit-tone effect. So the concept was approved, but his face was not. Apparently, he doesn't like having his photo shown. So we looked at different things, and we ended up feeling that referencing back to Illustrator's original splash imagery of Botticelli's Venus de Milo would be the right image to use. And then during that time, Sean helped built me this awesome script in Illustrator that analyzes each area of the image, and then we'll replace it with a corresponding symbol, pretty much taking this to this relatively. So it saved a lot of time. But there's also some fine tuning and, you know, to pull out the gradients in the hair, some of the shadowing on the face. And considering the size of the wall, it's a 2-story high wall, and the icons are all about 1.5 inches high. It meant that there's over 16,000 icons in this piece. So we've been able to bring this and some of the other projects to our other offices worldwide, like this one in Sydney, Australia, or in Washington, D.C. And then the last project I want to share that was kind of influenced from the Kitten Pony project was the rebranding of our XD org. This is our previous XD logo. It was designed a number of years ago, and while it was fun at the time, it started to feel a little dated, and it feels a little bit like a bomb dropping down, which isn't always the best thing. So we had our intern, Emma Chang, design the new logo, which has a little bit more physicalness to it. It's flat, it feels a little bit more modern. And then she took that and took her own spin on the use of the color spectrum that we created before. And she used the high saturation colors and evolved the way we use them in a completely new way. So establishing that consistent brand system served our users as far as the product icons that we make, but it also helped us as a team because we didn't have to reinvent the wheel every time or every 18 months. It let us have a little bit more mental space, workspace, in order to focus on these other projects and really extend the brand out in ways that would impact other people at the company, other users, and that's about letting the brand really live. So, 3 final things to take away, and I think that these can apply to any brand system, whether you're creating a system for 2 products or for 100. So the first thing is to think about scalability in terms of hierarchy. So usually this means having less of this. And this can be really difficult because we come at a lot of things with a pre-established hierarchy in our minds, and breaking down those walls and saying that things can look or seem like each other is quite a bit different than what our instinct is. But it works as far as a brand system. The second thing is to make it beautifully scalable. And this often means using classic design elements instead of the newest design trends in your product logos. A lot of times you'll want to reduce down the amount of elements too, to make clear of what they are and what can change and what can't. And then lastly, you'll want to make it consistent. Trust your process and hold true to your design decisions. When that interaction for the brand is consistent and reliable, it builds a stronger value in it, and having that brand deeply valued over time then leads to a really long-lasting brand system. That's all I got. Thank you.
So, and if you haven't dropped off your little piece of paper with your lovely icons, do so now so yours can be on top. But we're going to just do a drawing, and I'll have Sonja do the honors. And very nice. I love that whole idea of the beauty being scalable as well. I thought, do we have any questions? If you guys have questions for Sonja, by all means. What questions do you guys have? I don't know if...
What prompted the shift into the letter icons? Sure. I don't know if it was between CS2 and 3.
Yeah.
But what was the driving force for that?
Yeah, so there was a shift between CS2 and CS3, and that was actually when Adobe and Macromedia merged. And that merger then brought, Macromedia already had, were using letters for their products, and so Adobe adopted that style.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Yeah? Mm-hmm. Tips on fighting? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so part of creating a really good argument for keeping that consistency is showing it in a lot of different use cases, explaining how the value behind keeping it consistent is, and really forming that argument well. Look at like comp up things next to your competitors, and show, like, one of the things that we are constantly arguing is that if we make our icons look like someone else's, then they're not ours anymore. And when you go to an app store, it totally loses its value. And so when you can own a style, then that's when your customers will know that this new product is from you because it feels like your other stuff. And so I think just trying to really fill out that argument for that is important. Yeah. Anyone? Yeah?
And
Has this brand system just been leveraged by your marketing channels as well?
Yeah, so our marketing also uses all the product logos that we make, and then they've taken different visual cues off it over the years. Yeah.
So I didn't catch all of that, I'm sorry, but the question was about branding, leveraging marketing leveraging your assets,
Yeah.
which is huge, by the way.
Yeah.
And it's fun seeing, these different icons being reinterpreted, like you did there's the exquisite corpse example you've done, but we've seen that done of the Creative Cloud logo, like similar to the Bully campaign.
Yeah.
And I just think that's really cool that you take something small, scale it up, it retains its beauty, like you said, and gets interpreted different ways, but still is recognizable.
Yeah.
I've always wondered, working in the Adobe office, who does all the amazing work as we walk by, and it's Sonja. So it's just really cool. And hopefully you realize it's kind of fun working on such a small scale and seeing it scaled up larger as well in spaces.
Well, and that's one of the things, first I didn't make every piece, so a lot of other people made this too, so I can't take all the credit for that.
You just made the cool ones?
Yeah. but also it's super exciting because most of my job is working at 50 pixels or 100 pixels high. And then to be able to create something that's 200 feet long, it's really nice to be able to let your brain work in these different ways.
And essentially your artwork is on everybody's laptop, which I think is cool as well.
So if you look really tiny, you can see an autograph. Just kidding.
She initialized. Her initials are on a pixel. All right, Sonja. Well, we'll give away a one-year Creative Cloud membership to some lucky winner in here. I'll let you do the honors.
Okay.
I don't know if there's any money attached to anyone. That would have got you.
Okay. I have Thitterat. I don't know if I'm saying, probably not saying.
Thitterat? Chimey? Thitterat. Come on up. Congratulations. And everybody give Sonja a warm congratulations. We're going to be talking to her some more up here. If you guys have more questions, just kind of join us. And we'll get started in a second with as well Dave Werner. Thanks, guys.